Ahoy! The New World devs announced some economy changes that are coming up today and answered some questions as well. I think that's worth talking about. Of course, generally it's a very stale situation at the moment with not much happening aside of the spring event, but at least we got some interesting news here. So, when it came to the things that they talked about in the last shows, they addressed some of those again and looked at how things had changed since then. They wanted to achieve more gamba in the game, more crafting again, people rolling different things, and that's why they introduced the matrices instead of chromatic seals for higher level crafting. This kind of ended up working out with a price increase happening for many high-end materials. When it comes to the general income of players, they have the cache of golden matter that they introduced, and they think that overall the total amount of players that are getting it is lower than they would like, and they're currently testing that. I think this makes a lot of sense because people are just using their gypsum for matrices instead and making more gold that way, and since most players don't care about dark matter anymore because they have enough of it, that's the only focus, so the cache would simply have to give more gold to be more worth it for more players. Along with that, there was an issue where the replacement for Juniper bags didn't make it into the game, but that is now fixed and it doesn't matter anymore. This was a temporary gold loss, but now we have the spring event anyway, so there's extra gold coming from that too. The median of what players currently have in terms of gold is 35,000 gold. This median, this average, is gradually increasing, but not too quickly. You can see that, of course, there are also players that have a lot more than that. The top 10% are in a very different range, but this is just a general idea of where you're standing relative to all players. There were some issues with tier 5 resource availability, so what they did is adding some more Ori nodes to Mirkgard. They currently don't have any plans to add more because they want to wait for the impact of this first. So far it has been lowering the price of Orichalcum slowly and increasing the price of Mithril very slightly, but Orichalcum is the main goal here. They think that people still have a lot of Mithril stockpiled, same situation as we had with Ironhide in the past when there was too much of that, so they just need to see how things develop first before they make further changes. They were once again asked how they monitor the economy, which they already answered in episode 1 and 2. They just mentioned this here in the context of another question, so they're using the Gini index, the wealth disparity, and the overall coin balances between players, as well as other metrics. But what they led into with this is how the economy looks in general right now, and here you can see that we are currently in a minor faucet economy, so there is more coin coming in than going out, but not anything drastic, nothing inflation-esque or anything along those lines. The weird spike that you're seeing in between here is actually a telemetry area at the beginning of Season 5, so you can pretty much ignore that, and what it looks like at the end is what it really looks like. So they're kind of achieving the goals in that regard that they currently want to achieve, though it is worth keeping in mind that with a smaller player population, this is probably also a fair bit easier to achieve because a lot of variables are easier to control on a smaller scale. Overall, they say players are spending more than before, for example in the faction shop to upgrade the new artifacts and some named items with a new season, for example if they are re-gearing. When asked about the top 3 economy issues at the moment, the first one was kind of an overarching point of many things at once. So first of all, inflation risk, of course. There's always the issue if things get too far into one direction, along with wanting all players to be able to engage in the economy and to get enough value out of experience. So it's difficult to match all of those at the same time, have people feel like they're part of the economy, get everything they want out of activities in terms of gold, but also not risk inflation. They also think that expeditions in particular may be a bit too rewarding, just referring to the raw gold here, not so much at selling gear from expeditions, which isn't really a thing anymore, but a lot of people are simply farming expeditions for gold at this point. And as the third point, they had the Sandworm as well as the open world arenas not being rewarding to run. Though I would say that gold is probably not the best way to fix it. They made some other mentions here. It sounds like they're thinking about adding chromatic seals to the Sandworm, when really I think the main problem is that the gear that the Sandworm offered was outdated almost right after its release and has been outdated since. So that's why most people simply don't care about it. If you're enjoying the video so far, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Somebody suggested breaking the war system and mixing it with influence races to allow players to make money from PvP instead of warloggers. So they said, first of all, they're not planning to break the war system in an economy video, so they want to address the making gold from PvP part though. PvP is roughly 1/5 of all incoming wealth. This is primarily from OPR, but then also from PvP track. And this percentage may increase if other activities get minor gold nerfs. So if expeditions get a gold nerf, then obviously the percentage of how much gold is coming from PvP would increase relatively speaking, but generally PvP is good for gold. They also mentioned that a lot of territories are barely breaking even from territory ownership due to the upkeep, and you gotta keep in mind there's a few factors going into that. For example, have the upgrades that you may need to do in your town. You also have all of the resources that you need to get in order to prepare for wars and all that stuff. It's not quite as simple as one would think, and I think a lot of the idea of people having so much gold comes from the early days when companies that own territories just had insane amounts of gold, and also from the fact that there are just a ton of war players in those big companies that buy gold, so it looks like those groups would have a lot more gold than others, when in reality a lot of that isn't exactly from owning the territories. When asked if they were planning to reduce the amount of mats or remove some mats from aptitude boxes, they said they want aptitude boxes to be a big pop. They have adjusted some things, like for example there was too much mithril, so they added some ori. They're not planning on removing things, but they might improve the rewards further. I thought that maybe the person asking this was talking about some of the rather useless things you can get from aptitude boxes, which I imagine not many people want in there. So I don't really see a point in having those low value materials just to have a bigger pop when you open the chest. I don't think that's good. The next question was if chromatic seals will continue to be time gated. They currently have no plans to remove the time gate, but they would like to add additional ways to earn chromatic seals to some of, quote, their hardest content, and this will be in future content. So maybe this means the next raid, maybe this means they want to add it to Sandworm, maybe they want to add a chance to M3s or the PvP track. There were two questions that were kind of going in the same direction. One was if removing Resilient and Ward plus offering us the option to upgrade named items was bad for the economy, and the other one was just if better rewards in general are bad for the economy because people are less inclined to buy stuff. The devs want to make the game fun, and to them Wards and Bane didn't feel fun, and I completely agree with that. It was just a flat stat increase. They would rather have more variation in perks and other things that allow for different builds that are fun for you, which I think they are achieving in PvP at the moment. We have a lot of perks that are actually very viable. You have conditioning perks, for example, that came up as one option, but then you also still have like Enchanted Ward, you have Elemental Aversion, that's still good. Health is actually still good as well, even though some people will tell you it's not. So there's a lot of different defensive perks that you can choose from, and now with a lot of the new aggressive builds, harnessing is also strongly considered, so you can give up some of that defense for aggression. So really you see that there are a lot more perks than there used to be in the past that actually have a reasonable level of viability at the same time. I think we're not quite on the same level in PvE yet, with some notable exceptions. I think there's a more standardized build path here for most, but overall I do think the goal that they have here and the approach they're taking for this is pretty good. I think a problem with PvE in that regard is that conditioning and gems, as far as I'm aware, don't stack still. So if they changed that, that could already have a big impact, because that could give people a reason to have more sets for different mutations again. And simultaneously it would mean that you would still be fine without the conditioning by using gems, but they'd have to balance that somehow. Either way, they think that it hurt the economy because there is less crafting, that's correct, but they also say that the quality of life gain in return is massive. They want to respect players' time, but don't want to give everyone the best gear for free. They think it's not good when someone needs to sink more than 100 hours into getting an item and then still not getting it. So that's where they, for example, introduced the pity ticker for artifacts so that you're guaranteed the drop eventually. But they do want to give players things to chase in the game. And if it was all just trading or just crafting, then the progression would simply be playing the trade post, which is what exactly it was in the past. If you look at the earlier days before the expansion, maybe 90% of what you got in terms of gear was from the trade post, with the exception of some named items with illegal perk combinations. But of course they're always looking to improve the balance in that regard. Somebody wanted to know how much money has left the economy since seals and inductors were introduced, and they say that through the faction shop they are losing, or money that's being spent is approximately 25 to 30 million per day, plus an extra 10 million on Tuesdays. So this is mainly from chromatic seals, and some people are still very much buying stuff on cooldown here. There won't be infinite consumables in OPR, that's currently not the plan. They want to make sure that it's not a burden on players, but at the same time a lot of income is coming from OPR. So if the income was, say, 20% from PvP, but then you need to spend 18% because you need all those consumables, that would not be good. So they're looking to have a bit of a different balance here where you're not spending as much as you're earning, but overall they want to keep that cost for OPR in there. And somebody wanted to know why wheat is not used for flour crafting, so that has been fixed in an upcoming patch. Tomorrow we'll be talking about some improved methods to farm the Springtide Bloom event, so if you're interested in that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And if you'd like to support me further and get early trading tips in return, then you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to all of my patrons who already do that, and thank you for watching. Duke Sloth, out.